Welcome to the podcast, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sash.
How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, you're here today to talk to us about all things mental health and, getting yourself aware of what your mind and your body are doing, together.
Mm-hmm.
What was your earliest experience of understanding mental health or experiencing something that you thought was slightly off?
Well, the experience definitely came before the understanding for me, but I didn't know it until many years later because I have no memory of it. But apparently when I was about 5, I was sitting on the steps outside our house at the time, and my mum thought I looked a bit glum and asked, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. And I do remember feelings of kind of just waves of kind of a gross feeling that I didn't understand at the time when I was little. But looking back, I think were kind of early signs of depressive tendencies, if not depression. And then when I was 15, I had a whole lot of other health stuff going on, physical health-wise. I had a thyroid wreaking absolute havoc on the rest of my body. And eventually I got to a doctor who diagnosed that condition, and then at the same time said, and I think you have depression, I think you should go on antidepressants as well. And even though I'd been so low for a number of months by that time, it was a real shock. It was just kind of hard to reconcile with my idea of myself and the idea of a person with depression. They were just, how do I make this fit? This is not an identity that I'm comfortable with at all. And I remember just being in the car with my mum and just crying and her just kind of holding my hand or something, just because it was confronting, even though it made so much sense. And it was kind of like, oh, of course, I probably should have gone on antidepressants a couple of years ago. I was 15 by this point. It was still hard to grapple with at that point.
Yeah. And what did your mum say? Does anyone in your family also experience mental health challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I had grown up knowing that mental health issues were rife on both sides of my family. No one in my immediate family had depression, but I was aware that on my mum's side there was a lot of anxiety and depression in her kind of cousins. Her mum had been a highly anxious person, and then on dad's side it was more so depression. So we'd always had kind of open conversations, I guess, about mental health issues in our house, but that didn't make it any less kind of shocking for me to be diagnosed with depression. Yeah.
And so you've said that you went in for a thyroid issue and then they said, we think you should go on antidepressants. What gave them that feeling? Like, did you have any specific experience that you were talking to them about?
No, and I don't think it's necessarily kind of trauma related for me.
Yeah.
It was just kind of over a period of probably a couple of years, but definitely a couple of months. I just experienced such low mood, very low energy, and that is a symptom of
Thyroid.
I had a wildly underactive thyroid at that point, severely underactive, and depression is a symptom that goes hand in hand with that. So couched in those terms, it was a bit easier for me to be like, okay, I'm depressed, but it's because of this thyroid issue. That's why, which made it slightly less confronting, and I think gave me the impression that once my thyroid was under control, the depression would also be under control and my mental health would improve.
And did that happen in the way that you thought it would? I know, like, the thing is, that journey isn't linear, you know what I mean? So whereas like what you've described, it does feel like, okay, if I can put this in terms of a timeline, if I do this, this and this, everything should be all right. And I'm assuming, well, I don't know, maybe it has been like that for you, but I'm assuming for me it hasn't. So
No.
so when did you kind of realize that wasn't just going to be a straightforward process?
I think once my thyroid was more under control and I was on antidepressants, had been for about a year or so, I realised that I stupidly tried to go cold turkey off the antidepressants at some point. I think I was in about year 11 by that point. And that was just disastrous. And I can highly not recommend it for anyone on antidepressants. But I think, it was because I still hadn't reconciled with that idea of being depressed and needing antidepressants and needing, medical intervention.
Yeah.
So I did that. That was a bad decision. And after that, I just broke down one day, admitted to my parents that I'd come off the antidepressants, went back on them, and was on them throughout high school, into my gap year, into uni. And I did see psychologists, not regularly enough. Because I had a lot of other health issues, the physical health issues kind of always took priority over the mental health, I think. So I was more likely to go to a doctor and, be having lots of blood tests and that kind of thing to try and control the physical health without really addressing the psychological issues that were probably behind the mental health issues. So yeah, no, it hasn't been linear. It's been very up and down, but I think definitely more up than down the past couple of years as I get older, and just accept things like I'm a person who needs to take more care to make sure that I am, things like factoring in exercise, trying to make exercise a non-negotiable, which is, a struggle, an ongoing struggle, but I'm getting better at it. And just knowing that I'm someone that needs to take more opportunities to check in with myself, to practice self-care more rigorously than other people, and just accepting that difference, I think.
Yeah. Well, so I went on antidepressants it would have been 2019. Yeah, beginning of 2019. And people in my family have been taking medication, whether it be Ritalin for ADHD, ADD, or other antidepressants for anxiety or depression. So I wasn't unfamiliar with the fact, but I kind of didn't know, exactly like you said, you'd been feeling low for a couple of months. I didn't know what was the point at where I should turn and ask, I need help. Like I need something a bit more than just your average, take time for yourself, whatever. Like I just need a little bit of a kickstart on something. And, I spoke to my psychologist about it, and he very much was like, you have your serotonin and your serotonin uptakers and that kind of stuff. He's like, if you are an anxious person, which I am, and very kind of jittery, you are dealing with flight or fight all the time. And at a point, your body just becomes immune to like it's constantly on. So your body isn't used to just, taking care of yourself at a regular level. And if we can do something about bringing you just down to that regular level so that you don't feel like every situation is a life or death situation, it can help. And that's why I started taking antidepressants. And similar to you, I didn't go cold turkey completely off, but I'm really bad at remembering to take it. And there are periods where I have just like for a week not taken it. And it's so
chaos.
It's chaos. It's not just chaos in your head, but even like things like side effects, like my weight, like just went ballooned because it wasn't used to the drug suddenly like not being there and then being there and then not being there and then being there. And God, do you think I could have just helped myself, really?
I know, but you get to a stage where you can't.
You just forget. It's so difficult to realize, exactly like you said, that this is a must, like that you need to do this.
Yep.
And if you are going off an antidepressant, so important that you wean off the antidepressant.
Yeah, and have medical advice about that.
Rather than self-diagnose. Because I know other people who have just gone cold turkey. And it's hard to admit that decision that you made was wrong. Like, when I went off, I remember for a couple of weeks and I don't know what was going on. I'm not even going to say that I was just crying or something. It wasn't that I was crying or sobbing or, the stereotypes of what somebody is when they're depressed. It was more just literally like, it'd be 3 p.m. and I was like lying in my bed and I was like
that apathy.
Yeah, I just didn't care.
Yeah. You just kind of feel like uncalibrated to the real world or something.
Yeah, dissociating. That's a big thing for me, is dissociating. Why would I need to get up at 3 p.m? Like, if I have nothing to do, do I need to be up? No. Well, then I can just lie here and get sweaty and smelly underneath my doona. That's fine. You know what I mean?
Luxury of living alone.
Oh, yeah. Well, now I have a dog, so she
keeps you accountable.
Well, that's the other thing. Maybe having a dog has helped me
I
stay
think it
in
does.
line.
I think it does.
You got a new dog recently as well.
We did. She was a COVID puppy.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, having to walk them, having to take basic care of them, I think means you can't become fully self-involved. Yeah. But also, that I think it's like dopamine is released when you look into a dog's eyes and like pat them or something, and the same thing for them. It's, having a dog's great for mental health.
It is great for mental health. A privilege,
obviously,
and
as well.
A huge privilege, yeah. I'm just thinking, so apart from exercise, are there any other things that you notice kind of, and this is what's hard, is that when you've got a physical problem, it's visible. So you visibly see it and you like have to take care of it because you can see the progress of it getting better or worse, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas your mental health, you don't have kind of that barometer or something that's like the Weasley's clock in Harry Potter where it says such and such is in danger or such and such is, you know, whatever.
Wouldn't that be helpful?
Oh God, wouldn't it? Because you just know.
It's invisible. It's an invisible illness.
Yeah.
And
are there things that you recognize and then think, okay, I need to do this, and this, or I can try this, and this, and see if it changes.
I think keeping stress levels down is really important for me. That probably ties more into anxiety than depression, but things like not saying yes to every social event, realizing that I'm an introvert who gets energy and strength from going inwards, from reading a book, from having deep conversations with people, but not necessarily in a room full of different people that I have to interact with. I think, not overcommitting socially is a big one for me. Other than that, eating really well. I have to eat really well because other physical illnesses mean that I have a ridiculous number of intolerances and things. So I have to eat basically a raw food diet. So I think that helps. But yeah, keeping really on track of things like making sure that I'm buying the medications and just like the supplements when I need to before, you know, I run out and then think, oh, I can't get to a chemist for 3 days, but that's okay. I'll just miss the antidepressant for 3 days and then be a mess.
I'm literally just realizing that I don't have
No, you're the worst.
that I need to go get it filled right after this.
Okay, well, I will hold you to that.
Me accountable to that. But you're right. Sometimes it escapes you. And I think I can thoroughly relate to you saying, learning how to say no is such a big thing because I don't know, this is how different people are brought up. And I actually mentioned this to my mum the other day and the rest of my siblings were like, that's not true. But my mum was like, actually, no, that's how we spoke to her. When I was younger, if I didn't feel like hanging out with people and mum noticed I had a really hard time as a child being social. Like I found it really exhausting. I wasn't bothered. I'd much rather be by myself. I'd much rather be reading, etc. Mum said, just fake it. She was like, just smile and fake it. She's like, by smiling. And I mean, the thing is, it is true. By smiling, your body you can convince your body that you are happy. But it also means that you're delaying feeling bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's something getting older, I've realized, okay, well, I don't have to just pretend.
Yeah.
Like I can just tap out. And I'm still not fully in tune with that myself. Because the other night I was at a party, I think it got really late, and I just started crying.
Oh.
I was so... But I was like, I need to be out because all my friends are out and my dog's with my mum. So I have the whole evening to myself. So I need to enjoy this by being out with my friends. Yeah. And then I was like crying to my friend. And I was like, I just don't understand the world. I'm so anxious. I can't believe I have to do law. I'm never going to have friends again. Like, all these things like just came out. And I should have just gone home.
Yeah. And I think it's, having to realize that what makes you happy might not be what makes the majority of the world happy, and like learning what works for you. It's a long process.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, there's the trope of like the troubled artist, the depressed artist. And I do notice, you know, a lot of my theatrical friends are people who are inclined to be depressed or anxious. And a lot of people who have mental health issues are kind of sensitive, more artistic types maybe, who don't find that great source of happiness and fulfillment in all the same things as, you know, mentally well, in inverted commas, people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing about what you just said as well is that at university, when you find people who have similar interests to you, sometimes those similar interests also reflect similar ways of thinking and therefore, you know, similar predetermined patterns, like cognitive patterns, such as depression or anxiety, etc. Do you think that helped you understand it and like destigmatize it more at university?
Yeah, I think it was definitely like, oh, it's totally okay to be a bit mentally unstable in this group of friends. Oh, that's nice. But also I think in that particular group of theatrical people, there's a bit of a tendency to maybe trivialize mental health.
Yeah.
And I think on social media, people kind of walk a fine line between, you know, keeping people informed about their mental illness and then turning it into a joke. And, you know, humour is absolutely a coping mechanism. But I do get a bit, it makes me slightly uncomfortable when I see people kind of like, lol, so depressed, lol.
Yeah.
And I think that does pose a risk for other people of thinking, oh, well, I can't think of my mental illness on those kind of humorous, light-hearted terms. Is that something wrong with me? Should I be able to just, you know, keep it light-hearted when I'm feeling actually really low and like I need help?
It's hard, yeah, I agree. It's hard to realise that other people are expressing it in their ways, because I'm definitely somebody who deals with my depression, but mostly like anxiety. I would say I have a lot of jitters. My legs always, you know, whatever. Before a situation, like I need to have mentally processed how it will go before I enter the situation. I would never post about it on social media. That's not me saying I never ever will, but I worry that if I do, people will think I'm, you know, asking for attention or that I'm being silly. And so it's more that I'm self-conscious of it rather than me thinking, oh, you're not allowed to do it. But I get what you mean. It's, you can't help but compare your experience to somebody else's. And is their experience more valid because it's more vocal? Or is your experience more valid because, you know, deep tortured artist, you're keeping it to yourself and suffering in private? There's, you know, it feels hard to distinguish what should be your own experience without everybody around you who's also saying, I am having the exact same experience. And it's, no, we're not having the same experience. We're having different experiences. You can have a laugh about it, but don't blame me if I can't laugh about that right now.
And it is just so individual. Mental health is so individual, and open conversation is so important. And keeping the conversation going about different ways that work for different people of dealing with mental health. Even though I feel like conversation has opened up so much about mental health in the past 10 years, that's as long as I've been on antidepressants, and people are much more comfortable with, oh, you have depression, oh, okay, you know, how does that affect you? Or me feeling comfortable talking to other people about depression and realizing how many people struggle with mental health issues. But even so, I feel like even antidepressants, there's still a bit of a stigma about.
Yeah.
And I had a fear when I was going on antidepressants that it would numb feelings. And that's a stereotype. And maybe, I know some people do experience that, you know, you feel numb and you can't experience the highs, and it rounds out the lows as well. So you just kind of sit in this middle ground of not feeling super joyful, but also not feeling the lows. Whereas that's not the case for me. That's not how antidepressants affect me. But yeah, I've definitely been like pill shamed about being on antidepressants. Not so much now, but when I was kind of in those teenage years and into my early 20s, just I think even though public discourse has opened up and is so much more empathetic and sensitive to people with mental health issues, the conversation about how you treat that is still it's a bit more nuanced than I think public discourse allows. And similar to what you're saying about the pill thing, I was on a certain amount for a long time, like about a year and a half. And then after that year and a half, my thing comes in like severe lows if I have a depressive moment. Yeah. And I had a severe low and I went to the doctor and I asked, I just, you know, maybe it's my blood sugars, maybe it's my weight, I don't know what to do. I thought it was going to be something physical. And she said, it's probably just that your body is used to your medication at that level and now you need to increase it. And I thought to myself, does that mean I'm going to have to keep increasing my medication for the rest of my life? Like, you know, keep going up 50 milligram doses. Yeah. But if that's what it is for me to be fine, then that's what it is for me to be fine. You know, and I might decide to go off it eventually and see if I'm able to, you know, because the things that were triggering me at a certain time are not around as much anymore. So maybe that will be better. But it's hard, I think, to understand that depression isn't just a characteristic, that it is something that is treatable, that it is something that is evolving and changing. You know,
Whereas when you watch a TV series and you see somebody who has depression, you don't see every single doctor's appointment, every single like time they refill their prescription, or every conversation they have with their friends. You don't have that full nuanced perspective of like what their journey is. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I mean, I have one that I want to bring up, but something that has now made me feel incredibly aware of just that experience is the Hannah Gadsby's Nanette.
Oh my goodness.
When she speaks about Vincent van Gogh and how in the flowers, and they were like, oh, you know, if he wasn't upset, then, you know, he wouldn't have made the flowers. And she's like, no, he was actually, you know, taking something that made him see colors more brightly, but he was taking that thing so that he wouldn't experience that depression or something like that. I highly recommend, if anybody listening to this podcast is, you know, questioning the validity of their experience, or whether or not they want to go on medication, or how they're just feeling about the chaos of the world, I would really recommend that. That really helped me understand that there shouldn't be any shame in wanting to get better.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something that's so difficult about depression as well, or for me at least, this was the case, I had to want to get better. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. That old saying, it was like at the time, I didn't really believe myself worthy of happiness. So I wasn't taking all the necessary steps to try and make myself better. I was lazy and
Apathetic towards...
No, just with taking medication.
Yeah.
It just was...
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, yeah, if I remember it. But I wasn't taking all the necessary steps to ensure that I was able to be my best self, because I didn't really believe myself worthy of that. And I think that's just been a matter of time for that to develop, for me to go, far out, it's been so long now. I'm sick of this.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to be happier. I finally believe that I deserve that after all these years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Were there any other influences on that journey towards getting better, or was it just a general maturing and then the people around you?
Yeah, I think maturing. My little sister also struggles with mental health, and I see a lot of kind of my earlier struggles now reflected in her, and almost wanting to kind of show her, you know, that you can improve the situation for yourself, and it doesn't have to be that same way forever.
No, that's a big thing. It's when you can see that somebody else isn't seeing themselves correctly. Because I have a specific person, and they're sadly not with us anymore, but when they couldn't see their own self-worth, but everybody around them was like, this person is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, I deserve that. Like, I deserve to be spoken to the way that I spoke to that person.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. If I'm telling her she's wonderful and deserves the world, she's not going to believe it if that's not reflected in how I look after myself and treat myself and take myself, you know, think of myself, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that's really nice. I feel like weirdly emotional. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about it. This is such a weird thing to verbalize, but you've done it so well, and I appreciate it.
Oh, I hope so. It's a pleasure.